let's get that toilet mounted right. Hey, this is John Young here. Today we're going to be talking about wax rings and toilets. Now, a lot of you have replaced a toilet or are thinking about replacing a toilet, and the wax ring, which this is one, I'm going to just set this back on the back here, is part of a toilet replacement, installation, what have you. And basically what this is a little, I'm going to kind of peel it away a little bit so you can just see it a bit better. It is literally a soft wax, and it has a little plastic kind of a funnel, for lack of a better way to describe it. This little funnel down here fits in to what is typically mounted on the floor of your bathroom. So what happens is that the wax ring will fit onto this little flange, and then the toilet will get screwed into the flange on top. Now this little flange, let me show you. This little flange, now when you're dealing with toilets, let's back up to a sink. A sink typically has the drain. We'll just pretend if this is the drain. Then it comes down under the sink, and then there is a little trap, a little U shape where it comes down and then comes back up and then goes out. That little trap is what basically keeps the stink from happening in, coming back up through the sewage lines. In a toilet, you don't have that. Typically, you've got this flange, and this flange could be sitting on wood. It could be recessed in concrete, depending upon what your floor material is, and sometimes even in some cases it's up on a little pedestal because you're on concrete below it, and they need to come down and have a spot for the liquids to go down and then head to the sewage system. So on a toilet or a stool, you're not going to have a trap anywhere. So really the biggest part of the toilet is to make sure you can get all the waste and such down in here, because it's less likely that it plugs in here. It is possible if you're not using enough water, too much toilet paper, and if you manage to get the toilet paper in here, it can plug up, but most of the time it doesn't. So just something to keep in mind is that the toilets very seldom plug here and beyond unless there's been like a lot of greases that have been somehow gotten into the line. That happens quite a bit. Or if you have people who are putting down the wet wipes, the flushable wet wipes don't dissolve quick enough and they can get hung up in these pipes. Anyway, this is the bracket. And that bracket will have, and you see that there's a little plate in here. This is when it's a new bracket. This little piece of plastic right here is in there, and that's a pop-out. So we could put this all together, connect all the sewage lines, and we're not going to have sewer gas coming up until we're ready to install the toilet. So if this was your first time of installing a toilet and you run into this, what you're going to end up having to do is, once you're ready to go, the toilet has been assembled, the tank is put on, what have you, then you'd pop this out, carefully break it out, and take the pieces out. Then you'd put your wax ring on, and then the toilet mounts, and then off you go. Now, that's one way to do it. Now, another way, and we've talked about this before, is using the Perfect Seal from Danco. So let's take a look at that. Now, the Perfect Seal from Danco is another variation of a wax ring, and it has little kind of rubber sides. And let's take a look at the bottom of the toilet. You can see how the little blue part will kind of fit around the little bottom on the bottom of the toilet, and then it will compress down. And if you take a look at it, you'll see that that little kind of funnel on the toilet is flush with the bottom of the toilet. So then what we need is, when our Perfect Seal goes on there, it will go onto the toilet, and that little piece will fit down in here. The blue part will kind of go around and seal up to it. Then the weight of the toilet will actually compress all of this, and lo and behold, there is a wax ring yet in here. So this inside will push down into our little flange. The wax ring will make everything, kind of fill the gaps and such, so we will have a nice seal, and then we can, the weight of the toilet, and it will be something that this toilet will seal up, and it'll give a little flexibility. One of the problems with wax rings, a traditional wax ring, is, let me grab it again, is once it's compressed and sealed. Let's say you've been on toilets where they've been a little wiggle because they just, for whatever reason, had a little wiggle. The wax ring, once it's compressed, it doesn't bounce back. The Perfect Seal will flex a little bit. So if there's a little bit of a wiggle with the toilet, the Perfect Seal is going to follow the toilet. It's going to have a little bit of give, and it'll keep that compression onto the toilet, so you're going to have less chance of having sewer gas or liquids escape from this. So definitely a neat idea. Now let's get back to this little flange here. You see that there are the little grooves around here, and when you get a new wax ring, let's grab the box here, there are going to be typically there are new bolts and such with that. And what happens is that those little bolts go in the holes on the flange, and you can replace those. Let's just show you this. The bolts for a toilet flange have kind of a little oblong head, and I'm going to have you take a look at the bottom. So this bolt can go in here, and then it can come in to the groove, and you can see that it can get into the groove and it won't come out of the groove, but it won't turn. So it's caught here. This will allow us to go, and this will be in the floor, and you'll have one of these on either side, and you can put the bolt in, move it into its position where you need to be, one on each side of the toilet. You've got the bolts there, and because the floor is here pressed up against the bottom, it's going to hold the bolt up like so. That way, when you put the nut on, you start turning it, it's going to catch on the flange, and as you tighten it up, it will pull up, and everything should be able to snug down very well. Once this has been glued and attached and such, it becomes a fairly secure mounting plate. If this is going into wood, they would have run some larger screws into the wood floor. If it's on concrete, they would have probably had this and poured the concrete, and the concrete would probably be up to, ideally what happens if you're going to pour concrete is you would take masking tape to tape off the back so it's not going to have some concrete come into the back of it. You would tape the top of it so it protects this from concrete, and then you pour your concrete, do everything, and then you can pull the tape off, and you've got your grooves here that are still good enough to get this in there, and you've got a nice clean surface because you've covered it and protected it. That's when you're doing concrete. Most of the time, it's going to be wood. That's what you have. If you've got a bathroom that was a wood, but they have poured some leveler, some concrete leveler, which is a very kind of a liquidy concrete they pour down, and it kind of finds the low spots to even a floor out. Sometimes you'll have it where it wasn't even in this area, and this may be at a little bit of angle. That's where you've got to have, you might end up having to have some shims on a toilet to get it set, because this will tighten up, but maybe the toilet is going to need a little help with a shim. There are plastic shims out there that do this, and they're designed for that. I'll put a link in the description of what those are. But ideally, this is hopefully flat, and everything will, it'll be level. Not all the time. Sometimes there's a little bit of an angle. That's where our good friend, the Perfect Seal here, will give us a little bit more forgiveness, because I can have my nuts here that come up through, and I can actually clamp the Perfect Seal into position. Then I just have to get the toilet over and get that little kind of out spot, that little out funnel from the toilet right in there, and tighten it all up, and everything is good to go. So what's the best one to use? Wax ring is the most inexpensive one. The Perfect Seal is going to give you a little more forgiveness of that. Are there times where you're going to use both? Well, this has a wax ring built into it, but there are times where some people have had to use 2 wax rings for whatever reason. If the bracket was too low, the toilet was too high. I have heard and seen spots where they have had to use 2 wax rings. So basically that little spot that fed into one feeds into the second one. So there would be 2 wax rings on top of each other. Typically where you maybe see that is if one of them was compressed down and the toilet had to be taken off, and they come back and they're like, it's low enough, I'm going to throw a second wax ring on and put it all together. I've seen that happen. Is it recommended? No, I wouldn't recommend that unless, of course, you need to have a super high one, and they do make extra large wax rings, which would be a better option. Or you go with something like the Perfect Seal, and you've got it all done in one fell swoop with that. So just a little tips and ideas and such when it comes to dealing with toilets and wax rings. We're going to be doing more toilet videos here, so you guys can kind of answer some of those questions that you have. And if you do have questions, put those into the comments, because that helps me to know what kind of videos that you guys would like to see me do in the future, and which questions you'd like to have answered. This is John Young. Thank you for watching.
For more tips and how-to videos, go to weekendhandyman.com.